Make sure you check out the first two parts of this video series. We show you how to pour epoxy into these routed out Great Lakes, as well as how to do seal coats so that you don't have any air bubbles in your final product. And today is finally that final shot here where we're going to do the flood coat over this. We're going to get a nice glass-like finish. Make sure you stay tuned. It's going to be good. Alright, first thing we're going to do is we have to put a couple of business decals. We're going to put those on with permanent vinyl adhesives. Then we're going to pour our flood coat over it. So you actually hear one, how to flood coat a piece, and then also how to do it over vinyl, which is kind of a whole other tricky monster itself. So, for our final flood coat, things you're going to need some sort of vessel that's going to hold enough epoxy. So, this particular piece is about just under 3 feet by 3 feet, so 9 square feet. You need about 3 ounces of epoxy, of the mixed epoxy, per square foot to do your flood coat, because it's going to be about 1/8 of an inch thick. Just like before, you're going to need your drill with paddle for mixing. I have an 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch square notch trowel here, and that's what we're going to use to make sure we get a nice even coat before we smooth it out. To help smooth things out, you're going to need a little short, these little short brushes are kind of handy to help chop out our lines that we're going to leave with the trowel. So that'll make a lot more sense as we get moving through this process here. These short little brushes, it's really important that you get all the little loose bristles out of it, because when we start working with the sticky epoxy, it's going to pull anything that's loose out, and it's going to get left in your final project, and you have to pick those out, hopefully before it hardens. It's kind of a mess. So again, today we're using Stone Coat countertop epoxy. So I'm going to use this 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch square notch trowel, and I'm going to use that to move my epoxy around. I poured it in the center so I can kind of mix it, ensuring that I get a good mix. Right now I'm just going to make sure I have enough to cover the whole area, and then I'll start setting it over the edge. I'm going to use my brush to help brush out the drip marks around the edge, and then also to finish off the grooves that are going to be left from this trowel. Alright, you see, just moving it around, I'm starting to lose some of those bubbles. It's starting to clear up. Get it moved around, being real careful when I go over these vinyl stickers. I don't end up roughing those up, scratching them, lifting up a little piece somewhere. Just getting the epoxy close to the edge, definitely not sending it over the edge just yet. I can move this stuff around from areas where I have a lot to where I need it. Okay, now that I'm sure at this point I'm going to have enough epoxy, I'm going to start sending it over the edge. It can be a fairly decent amount of epoxy is going to go over. If you feel like you sent too much over, just use your hand to rub it in. As I start to mow the lawn around here, this trowel is starting to leave some definite residual grooves. I'm going to show you a technique with the brush to get rid of those. So I'm going to grab my 2-inch chop brush, and I'm going to load it up with some epoxy first. Make sure, as I'm kind of dragging through my gloves here, I'm not losing any more bristles. Take some of that epoxy out of my reserve. I'm just going to start working the sides here. Just nice long brush strokes. I don't leave any choppy marks here. This is getting out any drips that might have started to run down. Alright, so right now it's not quite perfectly even. The trowel helped me get a nice even coat somewhat around the piece, but next I'm going to chop it out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the brush this way with the angle coming down towards me, and I'm just going to hit it pretty hard in a random pattern all the way up and down. And that's going to take out any of these lines left behind by the trowel, as well as finally even things out. So let's get started here. Again, I don't want to use a pattern. This needs to be random. It's going to make some bubbles. That's okay. This will flatten out once we torch it. Make sure I go right to the edge. So you can see what's happening here. I'm pressing down and then pulling up. And it's taking away those trowel marks left behind. As I'm doing this, some more is getting shoved over the edges, but that's okay. So I'm going to come through and brush it again before I start torching. It's going to be dripping on the bottom, that's fine. I'm going to go through later and grind that off. Alright. Looking pretty good. A lot of bubbles have been encased in the epoxy though, but I'm going to take care of that with the torch momentarily. Now I do the sweep with the torch. I'm not going to leave it one spot too long, but I'm not just crazily going back and forth. I'm just trying to knock the bubbles out. You'll see them disappear as I swipe across. And what we're getting now is a benefit from doing the seal coats. Had I not done any seal coats and just tried to put a flood coat on top, be constant air bubbles, constantly fighting them, and in the end it's not going to look very good. It's going to look like you shot it with a shotgun. So in this particular case, we should end up with a nice flat glass-like top. So that was just one torching and pretty much got most of the bubbles out. That's the benefit of the epoxy being pretty warm. So I'm going to hit it a couple more times every few minutes. Welcome back. It's been about 48 hours since we did our flood coat on our map of Michigan here. And this advertising piece, which is what it's turned into for US 12 Marine, Michigan Custom Canvas. They're out of Jerome, Michigan. So if you're in that area, need any kind of boating needs, service, batteries, check them out. They're very helpful. I'm really happy with how this laid out. You can see that we don't have any bubbles coming up. We don't have any sinkholes that have pulled our epoxy down. We have a nice even flood coat over the whole thing. That's thanks to those seal coats that we took the time and did. At this point in the project, we just have our little drips that have hardened up on the bottom. I'm going to use a grinder with a metal sanding disc on that to take those off, then sand them down smooth, and that's it. This baby's ready to go. Typically after about 16 hours, stone coat countertop epoxy will harden up, stiffen up, and it will be set. At about 24 hours, it's usually hard to the touch, but still a little soft. And at 48 hours now, it's hardened up, and I can touch this, but still want to be a little careful with it. Epoxy is a lot like concrete, where it's going to take 7 days before it's pretty hard to start doing. It's hard enough to start doing things on it, setting things on it. About 30 days before it's fully cured and at its hardest point then. I usually like to wait a couple days, maybe 3-4 days before I flip it over on its top and then sand off these little niblets here. I will put some sort of blanket down before I sand those off just to protect this beautiful finish. So I think it turned out really nice. Our Great Lakes are inlaid. Our vinyl, we ended up with a little, because we layered the vinyl, ended up with a little black showing, but I really kind of like that. How the black gives it a little more depth almost, looking at it. So if you like what you saw, make sure you pound that subscribe button down there. Make sure you like us on Facebook, then you get notifications whenever we have a new video out. Thanks for watching. A viewer reached out to us, said that they wanted this piece as an advertisement. Well, that was super easy. So we're finally ready to start doing this project here. We're going to get it finished off now. Boy, that was easy. I highly suggest everybody tries to put vinyl underneath of their flood coats because that went so smooth. With these short little brushes, it's really important that you get all the loose Brussels over there. Make sure you de-shed your brush.